Tonight, as the mists unspool over cobblestone and slate, welcome to silent history. Settle in, dim the lights, pull the blanket up to your chin. And before we wander into the hush of Victorian London, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. If the mood suits you, tap like so the lantern stays lit for the next traveler. Breathe in slowly. Let the room soften. Let the day fall behind you like a coat on a quiet chair. We begin. The fog arrives as a patient thing, drifting from the river and the low fields, climbing stair by stair up stone embankments and brick lanes until London wears it like a shawl. Lamps bloom and disappear, little suns in a private sky, their glass beads clouded by breath, the brass collars damp with the night's dew. Down Fleet Street a cartwheel clicks once, twice, then hushes. A horse exhales a silver ribbon that drifts and dissolves. Somewhere far off, a bell keeps time with an old, deliberate hand. On All Hallows Eve, the city tends to itself. Shop bolts thrown, curtains drawn, kettles lowered to a simmer. People become silhouettes behind watered glass, shoulders hunched, hats brimmed, collars high. And yet the pavements are never entirely empty. A charwoman gathers her bucket, tipping the gray water into the gutter with a practiced wrist. A printer's boy shuts the press and lingers a moment in the doorway, ink on his fingers, listening to the way the fog quiets the world. The chestnut man adjusts his brazier, coaxing the little coals to glow. The peel of roasted skin cracks faintly. The smell is warm and nut-sweet, and a touch of smoke. The fog smells of iron rails and river ropes. It tastes faintly of ash and apple peel. It curls under doors and through keyholes and into thoughts. In such air, footsteps sound older than they are. Your step is not only yours, but also some other foot that passed a century ago, laid beside yours by the stones that remember. Turn left with me, then, away from the larger soundings and into lanes that pinch and angle, where laundry lines catenary from window to window like thin moonlit bridges, and a pair of crows debate the ridge tiles in short, thoughtful cries. Here, a lamplighter's ladder leaves a wet kiss on the brick. There, a painted sign swings with a wooden sigh. The gray mare and crown, its gilding dulled by soot and weather. No ghosts yet, only breath and brass and the low ticking of a house settling into the hour. And a figure. You notice him first as the fog notices him, by the subtraction he makes in it. Hat brim like a little roof, coat long enough to whisper. His pace is full of understatement, neither hurry nor leisure, measured exactly to the length of the street. The heel of his boot speaks a careful language with each stone. He passes beneath a lamp, its halo catches the nap of his sleeve and the brief glint of a silvered clasp, and then he is shadow again, a shape that the mist reluctantly yields. No satchel, no cane, nothing in his hands but the night. People see him and then pretend not to. A woman with a wool shawl steers her child to the other side of the lane. Two clerks close a phrase half-spoken and file it away behind their teeth. It is not fear. It is the old London politeness toward the inexplicable. The city is full of doors. Not all of them have hinges. He turns down a narrower way, one of those slivers of street that map-makers draw with a hair and a breath. The lamps thin. The fog thickens. A smithy's metal tang lingers from the day. Wire, horseshoes, hand-wrought nails cooled in pails that steamed like small ponds at dusk. Above, a window crack throws the shape of a lullaby into the night. Just the shape, not the tune. The singer has been singing so long that the song wraps her like a cloak. Our stranger pauses. The fog arranges itself around him, as steam will arrange itself around the lid of a kettle, tender, interested. Somewhere ahead, something rustles. A fabric sound, not a creature sound. The lantern of a man at the alley's far end rises and falls in an uncertain hand. The flame wobbles, the light spills and withdraws, and the shadows change their loyalties each time it does. Cold night, the lantern-bearer says, and you hear in it two kinds of cold. The stranger inclines his head. No answer, but not unkindness either, only an attention being kept for something else. The lantern-bearer clears his throat. The flame hiccups, grows small, then larger again, like a heart steadying itself after an unexpected fright. Not many choose this way, the man says lower, not after dark. The fog, which has manners of its own, seems to listen. There is a taste of iron now, a polished penny noted on the tongue. Not alone. You do not hear the whisper so much as realize you have already heard it. It clings to the brick the way damp does. The lantern-bearer's fingers whiten on the handle. His eyes go everywhere at once. The child of himself, some young self, looks out of those eyes for a second, the part that once believed and then learned not to, and perhaps tonight believes again. The alley's wall darkens, then draws a breath. Not in, not out. Simply a motion inside stillness. Where a shadow should end, it does not. Where brick should be brick, it is suggestion. The light blinks. In the blink, a figure stands not on the ground, but in the plane of the wall, as if paper had grown depth and memory had grown weight. It is taller than its echo and thinner than its hunger. The length of its arms is wrong the way long sorrow is wrong, by inches that feel like miles. Where a face would be, there is the sense of many faces layered, as ferns layer, mouths that do not open, eyes that have done their looking and are ready now only to be seen. Do you see it? The lantern-bearer manages. The stranger does not step back. He steps forward one shoe length, and that inch of motion seems to grant the alley permission to inhale again. What is it? The man breathes. What do you see? What the city remembers, the stranger answers, and the fog approves this phrase, taking it into itself. All that it has buried. The hum begins then. It is low, so low that at first you call it a feeling, not a sound, but where it touches the puddles, the water quivers, and where it touches the slack line of laundry strung above you, a droplet lets go and stings the back of your hand. Not cold, not warm, the exact temperature of unwept tears. The lantern flares, only a little, and in that oversight of brightness the layered faces turn, not toward the flame, not toward the man, but toward the recognition that is being offered to them at last. For a heartbeat, the wall is not a wall. It is beds in a ward, iron and narrow, and a cough that has learned too many names. It is a river bruise, moonlight on wet hair. It is the knitted silence of a workhouse supper where spoons put down their small hard moons in bowls in very nearly the same moment. Then the light remembers itself and shrinks, and the wall is brick again, except that now you know better. The stranger lifts a gloved hand, palm open, nothing in it. The gesture is neither command nor conjuration. It is greeting. The hum, approving again, warms by a degree. The lantern-bearer feels the warmth reach his wrist bones like a tiny fire making itself known in an old hearth. Some things linger, the stranger says. Most mean no harm. Hunger is not harm. Loneliness is not harm. Memory is not harm, though it can startle. Up in the window where the lullaby was, the window settles shut, kindly, like a grandmother tucking in a child. In the distance, the bell makes a single remark and then thinks better of it. The shadow presses in, not closer, truer. The alley returns the sound of a boot heel. The city checks its pockets for a match and finds it. The stranger looks away from the wall at last and toward a door that has been there the whole time. A low door furred with damp, the iron strap like a black smile. He touches the hinge with 2 fingers, and whatever inside the hinge has wanted to sing for years finally sings. The door gives. The air beyond is cellar cool and mint dark, with a lavender confusion braided through it from a sachet long broken somewhere down in the wood. Inside is small at first, then the smallness opens as a theater opens when the curtain moves. You thought the world was the curtain. The world was what the curtain concealed. Timber polished by other shoulders. Little marks where someone once counted in chalk and then wiped and counted again. The floorboards talk softly to one another, as boards do when a new weight is offered and found acceptable. The lantern-bearer listens for rats and hears only time. A seam in the wall, a careful seam, the kind that people make when they wish a seam to be forgotten, runs top to floor. The stranger touches the seam and finds the softest click, like the release of a breath. The panel swings, cold stone exhales. Steps go down. The hum is there already, waiting for feet. It is not the hum of machinery. It is the hum of kept promises and unfinished sentences and palm prints that have dried but not departed. It steadies. It invites. It asks nothing. Some paths are meant to be walked in darkness, the stranger says, which is not unkind. Listen. He descends. The lantern-bearer follows. The steps narrow, then widen, then level. The stone is damp where a trickle finds its way each season. Scratched spirals have been idly drawn by a thumb and a thought. In the corner, a forgotten nail has rusted into the color of dried blood, which is to say, brown, which is to say, earth, which is to say, returning. At the landing, a passage runs both ways and also forward. The stranger knows which way is forward because the hum gets a shade kinder. Places have tempers. This one has patience. Niches appear as they walk, small shelves curled into the stone, the way a swallow curls a nest into an eave. In each, a thing, a button, a coin whose head has given up and let the tale tell the story, a spool with 3 turns of thread left, a papered violet that has kept its persuasion longer than expected. The lantern-bearer stops at a thimble. The metal is not cold. It is exact. The dimpled pattern prints into his fingertip as if to prove that the hand that used it once was not imagined. In the next niche, a toy horse waits with its paint worn to the truer wood beneath. It leans very slightly toward him, as small horses will when they wish to be told they are still good. He obliges with a touch. The hum approves again. Every object carries an echo, the stranger murmurs, not as lesson but as courtesy, naming a thing so it need not name itself tonight. Some are loud. Some are the size of a breath. The quiet ones last the longest. The corridor widens into a round room, a dome small as a held breath. Shelves scallop the wall. In each scallop, safekeeping. A porcelain cup whose lip is chipped like a tooth. A tiny portrait on ivory whose face keeps forever the half-smile that did not yet know what news the post would bring next day. A ribbon that has kept its blue by remembering shade. The stranger sets down the lantern on a brass hook, and its light grows braver for having been given a place. He kneels at a low niche and lifts a music box. lid cracked, hinge resigned. It opens with the politeness of the very old, and a tune perhaps a mother made up at a window in late afternoon. Bits of hymn, bits of nursery, finds the air like a bird finding a branch it once knew. Dust rises to dance with it, each mote trying on the shape of a note and becoming, briefly, music. Listening is the first kindness, the stranger says, and the music agrees by continuing as if nothing had ever interrupted it at all. A breeze tests the room and leaves it as it was, only letting the paper in a letter stack lift one edge as if a word had stretched in sleep. The lantern-bearer reads a line, and then another. There is nothing supernatural in the ink, only the supernatural fact that what someone felt on an otherwise unremarkable Thursday can still be felt now, if you give it a lantern and the silence to return in. Elsewhere, a little chime rings once, one of those string bells parents knot above a cradle to make sleep seem like a thing with a sound. The sound is small and round and warm. You could put it in your pocket and have company all night. Even water remembers, the stranger will tell him later, at a pool that reflects lantern light as if it were starlight with a local habit. For now the remembering is all dry things, the hiss of a wick when you pinch it, the way a comb picks a river in a child's hair, the heat in a bowl held between two pairs of hands that are not touching and are. The room releases them gently back to the passage. New alcoves greet them, a shelf of candle stubs, blackened, bowed, still redolent of beeswax and supper, a fold of cloth that remembers rain, a list in pencil of debts paid, and the single debt forgiven at the bottom with a flourish that took more courage than the coins above. As they go, the ceiling lifts, the air cools, and the hum grows broad enough to be called a heartbeat without metaphor. They step into a vault where lanterns live in the walls like tame stars. The shadows here do not hide. They accompany, swaying with the light as if keeping watch in a slow dance taught in a kinder school. This, the stranger says, and the word is enough to summon the shape of what he means, is the heart of what is kept. All around, little histories kindly curated by time, a pressed sprig, a spool with a child's first lopsided stitching still in it, a spoon that learned the temperature of broth and comfort, both. Faces in miniature whose eyes still know who stood just outside the picture and laughed. A handkerchief with initials that matched the ones in a letter on a shelf 3 rooms back. The sort of coherences that only a city can make by carrying 1,000,000 lives and letting them brush backs on stairways and in markets until the cloth grows strong. The lantern-bearer kneels at a shallow pool in the floor, the water still as a held breath. The lantern's glow writes itself upon it in loops of gold. For a moment a figure moves in that gold, not menacing, only present, the echo of another kneeling, another night. Then only your own face again, softer than you expected. "You see?" the stranger says softly, his hand light on a shoulder that is grateful to be a shoulder tonight and not a burden carrier. How the smallest things endure, how the quiet is full, how the dark is gentle when you let it be. The hum supports the rest of the thought without words. The lantern's wick lowers itself a fraction, and still there is enough light. The fog above ground does what fog does when it finds the hour it loves best, becomes the hour. If your jaw has unclenched, keep it so. If your hands have found each other, let them rest together on the blanket, not gripping, just agreeing. Let the house you are in remember its own quiet rooms, the way staircases in every century learn the size of feet and make a music of it. If sleep wants you now, it will have you kindly. If you wish to walk further, we will. For now, let the city hold its breath around you, and the stone keep its warm, low song. Close your eyes if you like. The lantern will mind the room. The road will still be here when you open them again. The lantern burns lower, and with it the night grows thicker, almost velvet in its hush. The city of London stretches like a great animal in sleep, restless in one limb, calm in another. But beneath the calm, the streets remember. Every alley, every soot-darkened window, every door too narrow for comfort, holds a memory. And tonight, as the air of All Hallows Eve lays its claim, those memories come closer to the surface, breathing with us. Imagine turning toward a marketplace that in the day thrums with the clatter of wheels and the quarrel of hawkers. At night it is another thing entirely. Stalls close like exhausted eyelids, canvas rolled, ropes slackened, benches bare. Yet the smells linger stubbornly. Fish too long in the open air, sweet rot of apples fallen to the ground, and the sour tang of beer spilled from casks. Even silence is not complete. A rat skitters, bold now in the absence of trade. A pigeon coos from a rafter, unaware that the day is gone. There, on a bench, lies a forgotten basket. Its weave is frayed, but it still holds 3 onions, pale globes glinting faintly in the lantern light. They gleam as though they wish to be jewels, though no hand will lift them tonight. And perhaps the market itself sighs, recalling the weight of countless baskets carried here and away, shoulders bent, coins traded. The silence holds all those voices in a kind of hushed archive, never raised, never gone. This night in London, children, though poor, though many with little more than threadbare clothes, sometimes fashion masks from paper, soot, and scraps. You can almost hear them, scraps of laughter darting between alleys, the shuffle of little shoes not made for running. One child wears a bonnet too large, another a mask cut from coal-black paper with eyes too wide. Their play is not just mischief, it is defense. To be costumed is to be hidden, and to be hidden is to be safe from whatever walks on this night. Behind them, parents close shutters tighter, muttering that such games invite trouble. Yet they let the children go, because laughter, even a small one, can push back against the fog. The city remembers these tiny rebellions against fear, too. And perhaps that is why, when you stand in a lane long enough, you sometimes hear the rustle of paper masks, even when no children pass. In Clerkenwell stands a house with a door that never quite closes, not because its wood is warped, but because memory itself has bent the hinge. It was once a lodging for apprentices, boys who came from the countryside to learn trades, wide-eyed and hungry, eager for more than plows and furrows. One night, long ago, the door was left ajar, and a boy stepped out into the fog. He never returned. They searched for him in the wells, in the taverns, by the river. His shoes were found, neatly side by side, at the mouth of an alley, as if he had stepped out of them and gone barefoot into the dark. Since that night, the door will not close, flush. It stays a finger-width open, as if still waiting for the boy to come back. Even now, if you lean close, you may feel a draught not of wind, but of longing, the air of unfinished return. People walk faster on that street, coats drawn tight, because to meet that draught is to be reminded that not all journeys find their end. No tale of London is whole without the river. The Thames lies broad and unhurried, as if it alone has patience for centuries. At night its banks are restless with creak of rope and moan of wood, barges shifting as if uneasy in their tether. The tide licks against stone steps, rising with a voice low and constant. The fog thickens here, the dampness richer, so that the lantern light softens and doubles in reflection. Sometimes you glimpse a shape at the edge, a figure too still for comfort, watching the water as though it whispers back. Was it a sailor lost in a storm, listening for the sea's reply? Was it a washerwoman who came one step too far down the slippery stairs? The city keeps its counsel, and the river keeps its dead. Yet to stand by the Thames is to feel history breathing at your shoulder. Empires fed it, plague touched it, kings feared it, poets sang to it. Tonight it speaks no words, only the patient rhythm of water on stone, stone on memory, memory on you. Pause now, listen. Even here, where stories and silences gather thick as cobweb, your breath is steady. Perhaps the chair beneath you is warm, perhaps the blanket heavier with each minute. The city continues its murmur, but you are safe, watching from the edge. The stranger we followed still walks, his boots tracing patience into the stone. Somewhere behind him, the lantern-bearer stumbles, but stays close, unwilling to let go of the small light. Together they lead us deeper, not into fear, but into the recognition that even the darkest streets are full of memory, and memory, when given a voice, loses its hunger to frighten. The fog curls close again, the lantern lowers, and the city, our city of Victorian London, remembers more. Pause now, listen. Even here, where stories and silences gather thick as cobweb, your breath is steady. Perhaps the chair beneath you is warm, perhaps the blanket heavier with each minute. The city continues its murmur, but you are safe, watching from the edge. The stranger we followed still walks, his boots tracing patience into the stone. Somewhere behind him, the lantern-bearer stumbles, but stays close, unwilling to let go of the small light. Together they lead us deeper, not into fear, but into the recognition that even the darkest streets are full of memory, and memory, when given a voice, loses its hunger to frighten. The fog curls close again, the lantern lowers, and the city, our city of Victorian London, remembers more. In Victorian London, houses had faces. You see it now. The tall, narrow rows, brick shoulders pressed close, each with 2 eyes for windows and a mouth for a door. Curtains twitch like lashes. A shutter creaks, though no hand touches it. Walk too quickly, and you miss it. Walk as the stranger walks, slow, measured, and you feel the gaze of every house upon you. Some say the windows reflect only what stands before them. But in these streets the glass remembers. Look too long, and you may see not your own reflection, but another's. Someone who leaned there years before, watching for a father who never returned from the docks, or for a sweetheart lost in cholera's swift hand. Their longing leaves a film on the pane. And tonight, on this night, the glass is restless. Why do they stare? The lantern-bearer whispers. Because houses live longer than people, the stranger replies. They keep watch when memory tires. Let us step inside one of these houses. The door opens grudgingly, wood swollen with years of damp, hinges croaking like a throat long unused. The parlor lies just beyond, wallpaper peeling in damp curls, the hearth cold, the air tinged with coal dust and lavender sachets that surrendered their scent decades ago. The furniture remembers. An armchair slumps under the shape of its last occupant. A piano, keys yellowed, waits for fingers that once stumbled through hymns. On the mantel, a clock has stopped at 3:15. Not this morning, not this year, but one forgotten afternoon when the spring wound down and no hand returned to rewind it. The silence that follows a clock stopping never leaves a house. It settles in the plaster. If you listen, truly listen, you can hear the parlor trying to speak. The scrape of a chair, the faint echo of spoons against porcelain, the rustle of skirts when visitors rose to leave. None of it frightening, only insistent, only unwilling to be gone. Above the parlor, the attic waits. Narrow stairs lead to it, each tread complaining faintly. The lantern's light trembles against rafters veined with cobwebs. Boxes huddle in corners, their labels faded. Linens, 1847. Michaelmas clothes. Mother's letters. Lift the lid of one, and the past exhales. Wool coats moth-eaten, but still carrying the musk of candlelit streets. A child's shoe, scuffed at the toe, sole worn thin by running. And letters, pages upon pages, ink browned, words blurred where tears once fell. The attic has been breathing these memories for years, in and out, slow as sleep. The lantern-bearer sets the flame down and touches one letter. His lips move silently over the name. Anne. He does not know her, yet her name weighs his chest as if it had always belonged there. The stranger does not stop him. Some burdens must be shared, even with the living who come too late. The rafters creak once, long and low, not in warning, in recognition. Back outside, the night hums with stories. In Victorian London, Halloween, or All Hallows Eve, was less about costumes and more about whispers. Families lit candles for the dead, bowls of apples left at thresholds so spirits might taste sweetness after long hunger. Children bobbed for apples, not only for sport, but to mimic the souls surfacing from shadow to light. And in poorer wards, neighbors told one another of ghostly processions, lines of the departed, walking silently through alleys, their forms pale as mist. Keep a candle in the window, mothers told their children. It will guide them past your door, not through it. Some believed knocking 3 times on wood banished evil. Others swore a pinch of salt at the doorstep kept wanderers of the spirit world at bay. And yet, even as they spoke these charms, they knew the city itself was stronger than any protection. It had always harbored both the living and the dead. As the lantern-bearer shivers, the stranger pauses. For the first time, his voice lengthens, as if he too is caught between memory and presence. The city is a library, he says, but its books are not paper. They are footsteps, breaths, whispered goodnights. Every door that closes is a page turned. Every shutter that swings is a sentence left unfinished. And on nights like this, the library opens its shelves. The lantern-bearer looks at him, uncertain whether to fear or follow. Yet the flame does not falter. And so they walk on. They come to a house thinner than the rest, wedged between 2 sturdier neighbors like a child between watchful parents. Its windows are dark, its door leans, yet it feels alive, the way an inhaled breath feels alive in your chest. Inside, the air is close. Wallpaper curls like parchment. The staircase bends as if bowing under memory's weight. At the top, a single room waits, bed unmade, quilt folded back, pillow hollow with the ghost of a head. A woman once lived here, and her story whispers still. A seamstress by day, stitching by candlelight until her eyes blurred. A dreamer by night, who pressed her forehead to the window-pane, watching for a figure who never returned from the docks. She left no children, no husband, no one to keep her name alive. Yet her sigh lingers in the fabric, in the rustle of curtains, in the faint smell of tallow candle. The stranger bows his head as he enters. Some griefs deserve reverence, even a century on. The lantern-bearer, trembling, whispers, "She's still here." "Of course," the stranger replies. The city does not forget those who were forgotten by the living. Step outside once more. The fog thickens, but it does not chill. It wraps, it soothes, it leads you deeper into quiet. The houses lean against each other like companions in old age, and as you walk, their faces soften, no longer suspicious, no longer stern. Tonight they simply watch, remembering while you pass as guest, as witness. Let your own breath slow to match the rhythm of their watching. Let your eyes grow heavy, as if you too are a house, keeping memory in your windows, warmth in your hearth. For now the night belongs to silence, and silence is generous. The lantern's flame sways gently as the two figures step away from the narrow houses. The streets breathe around them, but the air begins to change. It thickens with damp earth, the scent of moss, iron, and rain-soaked stone. The stranger leads the lantern-bearer not further into the alleys of the living, but toward the cemeteries and churchyards, those quiet, sprawling libraries where London keeps its most enduring stories. Victorian London was not only a city of smoke and soot, it was also a city of graves. For every 10 breaths taken above ground, 100 lives lay below it, in yards that spilled beyond churches, in gardens turned into burial grounds, in vast new cemeteries built to hold the multitudes. Tonight, on All Hallows Eve, these places are not silent. They are heavy with presence, waiting. Iron gates rise, blackened by soot and rain, their bars cold to the touch. They creak as the stranger pushes them open. The sound is long, low, a note that seems to echo into the bones. Inside, the churchyard spreads like a sea of crooked teeth. Headstones tilted, some sunken, others broken, each etched with names half consumed by moss. The lantern-bearer's breath quickens. "So many," he whispers. "So many always," the stranger answers. London grows upward, but it also grows beneath. Indeed, it is said that in the heart of the city, soil has more bones than roots. Step anywhere, and you stand upon centuries of the departed. Every footfall here is a trespass. Every lantern glow is a brief defiance against the weight of time. Iron gates rise, blackened by soot and rain, their bars cold to the touch. They creak as the stranger pushes them open. The sound is long, low, a note that seems to echo into the bones. Inside, the churchyard spreads like a sea of crooked teeth. Headstones tilted, some sunken, others broken, each etched with names half consumed by moss. The lantern-bearer's breath quickens. "So many," he whispers. "So many always," the stranger answers. London grows upward, but it also grows beneath. Indeed, it is said that in the heart of the city, soil has more bones than roots. Step anywhere, and you stand upon centuries of the departed. Every footfall here is a trespass. Every lantern glow is a brief defiance against the weight of time. The lantern-bearer lifts his flame close to a stone. Letters carved deep now blur with lichen, but fragments remain. "Beloved daughter, taken by the fever, aged 7. We shall meet again." Each phrase is both a wound and a lullaby. The fog curls low, trailing fingers across the words, as though the air itself remembers the hands that once carved them. The stranger bends, brushing away moss with reverent care. "Every epitaph is a conversation," he murmurs. "The living speak to the dead, and the dead listen longer than we know." And in the hush that follows, the lantern-bearer almost hears it. the faintest echo of responses not written, not carved, but carried still. Sighs, prayers, a mother's last good night to a child. In Victorian times, London birthed what were called the Magnificent Seven, great cemeteries built on the city's edges, vast fields of stone and memory. Highgate, Brompton, Nunhead, and others. By day they were visited by mourners, poets, lovers seeking solitude. By night they became another world. Highgate especially earned whispers. Ivy crawled its catacombs, angels leaned in broken poses, and the paths wound like sentences unfinished. Some swore they saw figures walking the avenues, processions of those too restless to lie still. Others spoke of voices rising from the Egyptian avenue, a passage of tombs lined like sentinels, each whispering as you passed. The lantern-bearer listens wide-eyed as the stranger speaks of these places, his tone neither fearful nor sensational, but reverent as one speaks of cathedrals. The cemeteries, he says, are not endings. They are neighborhoods, quieter, yes, but filled with presence. The city above grows hurried. The city below remains patient. Victorian grief was not subtle. It wore fabric and rules. Women draped themselves in mourning dresses of black crepe, their hems heavy as sorrow itself. Veils thickened their faces, so that even sunlight struggled to touch their skin. For months, sometimes years, color was forbidden, laughter restrained, joy postponed. Even the houses mourned. Curtains were drawn, mirrors covered, so spirits would not be trapped inside. Clocks were stopped at the moment of death, so that time itself bore witness. And on All Hallows Eve, when the veil was said to thin, families placed candles in the window, beacons for the departed, guiding them not into the house but safely past it. The lantern-bearer shivers. So much weight in grief, the stranger nods, because they believed memory was not enough. Grief had to be lived, stitched into fabric, pressed into silence, written into rules. The dead were not only buried, they were carried every day in how the living dressed, spoke, and even ate. Not all had such rituals. Some lay in graves unmarked, stacked with others in pits dug hastily for plague, cholera, or poverty. The lantern-bearer's flame flickers across a corner where no stones stand. The earth there is uneven, the grass patchy. "Here?" he whispers. The stranger lowers his head. "The forgotten rest here. No names, no epitaphs, yet even without stone, the ground remembers. And as they stand, the air grows heavy, almost pulsing. The lantern-bearer feels it in his chest. Not words, not voices, but the weight of countless lives pressed into silence. He sways, knees weak. The stranger steadies him with a hand. "Do not fear it," he says gently. "Even the unnamed are not empty. They are part of the chorus. And tonight they are closer than breath. As they move deeper, the lantern's glow joins others. Small flames dot the churchyard, candles placed by hands unseen. They burn low, some nearly extinguished, some steady against the fog. The stranger gestures to them. Every candle is a bridge. The living light them, the dead receive them. And in that flicker, a bond is renewed. The lantern-bearer watches the flames tremble, each seeming to bow slightly as if in greeting. The sight is not eerie. It is tender, almost like watching children wave to passing strangers. He feels a calm wash over him, softer than any fear. From the church tower above, a bell tolls. Only once. Its note spreads through the fog, deep and resonant, not summoning, but acknowledging. The sound lingers long after the strike, vibrating through the stones, through the bones beneath, through the very chest of the lantern-bearer. The stranger bows his head. "That is for the unseen," he whispers, "the toll that says, 'We remember, we walk with you still.'" For a moment, silence deepens. Not emptiness, something fuller. The churchyard itself seems to exhale, as though the bell's note has eased its centuries-long breath. They walk on. The lantern's flame burns lower, yet its light is steadier now, as though strengthened by the countless small flames around them. The lantern-bearer no longer clings in fear. His steps match the stranger's, slow, reverent, listening. The churchyard is not a place of dread. It is a place of memory, vast and enduring. Every stone, every patch of grass, every candle flame is part of a chorus. And tonight, on this night of thinning veils, that chorus hums softly in the fog. The lantern-bearer breathes deeply. For the first time, he feels no need to rush. He understands. This city of the dead is also a city of belonging, and in its presence, the living are never entirely alone. Londoners of the Victorian age did not walk through graveyards without charms. Some carried sprigs of rosemary or laurel, herbs thought to guard against spirits. Others whispered verses, half prayer, half rhyme, believing the rhythm kept the dead at peace. Children were taught not to point at graves, lest the finger itself wither. If you tripped in a cemetery, it was said a hand beneath had caught your ankle, tugging gently to remind you who lay below. And if a candle blew out during a funeral procession, mourners saw it as the soul itself, slipping away, unwilling to linger in the world of the living. The lantern-bearer listens wide-eyed as the stranger recounts these tales. Each superstition is less about fear, more about respect, the careful courtesy of the living toward the countless unseen companions underfoot. By gaslight, the stranger speaks of funerals, long, solemn processions winding through London streets. Horses draped in black, plumes nodding heavily, coffins borne on carriages with glass sides, curtains drawn, mourners in veils, their silence as loud as bells. The poor often rented mourning clothes, paying by the day to grieve in dignity. Even children wore bands of black around their arms, tiny symbols of sorrow too heavy for their years. Some funerals stretched for hours, the carriages trailing like shadows through the fog. Crowds gathered to watch, not out of morbid curiosity, but out of respect, because each procession was also a reminder that death was never far. The city itself walked with the dead, the stranger says. Every street became, for a moment, part of the cemetery. The lantern-bearer shivers as the stranger describes Highgate's legends. By day, the cemetery was a place of poetry and philosophy. By night, it belonged to stories. Some swore they saw a tall figure with glowing eyes moving among the tombs. Others spoke of spectral children playing silently among ivy and stone, their laughter carried only by the wind. One tale tells of a mourner who fainted by a grave and awoke to find herself surrounded by pale forms, dozens of them watching her in complete silence. She fled, but for the rest of her life she swore the figures followed her home, shadows leaning against her door. These stories, the stranger notes, say less about ghosts than about longing. The Victorians wanted to believe the dead stayed near. They feared absence more than presence. Among the tokens of remembrance, none were more intimate than mourning jewelry. Rings and lockets contained curls of hair, sealed beneath glass or woven into intricate patterns. Some bore tiny photographs of the deceased, their eyes staring out from brooches worn close to the heart. A woman could carry her husband's hair in a bracelet, each strand twisted into a chain, cool against her wrist. A child might wear a pendant with the face of a sister lost to fever. These objects were more than adornment. They were fragments of the departed, carried daily, touched often, kissed in secret. The lantern-bearer studies his lantern's glow reflected in a locket displayed on a headstone left behind by some hand long gone. He imagines the grief it carried, the love it tried to hold. Even jewelry, the stranger says softly, was a grave you could wear. In London's poorer wards, another belief thrived, that on All Hallows Eve, if you sat in a graveyard from midnight until dawn, you would see the spirits of those who would die in the coming year. Brave or desperate, souls sometimes tried it, sitting shivering on the stone steps of churches, clutching shawls against the cold. They claimed pale figures drifted past, faces both familiar and strange. Some saw neighbors, some saw themselves. Most left before the first hour passed, unwilling to know too much of the year ahead. The stranger lifts his gaze to the fog. To sit among the graves was to sit among the future. Few could bear it, but those who tried carried the memory forever. Children, too, played in cemeteries. For them, the stones were not only memorials, but climbing posts, hiding places, secret fortresses. They knew the shortcuts through churchyards better than any adult, darting between graves as though weaving through a playground. Sometimes they skipped rope along the paths, the bells of their laughter mingling with the tolls from above. But even they respected the rules whispered down by parents. Never disturb the fresh earth, never sit on a headstone, never whistle at night among the graves. To break these rules was to invite a shadow to follow you home. The lantern-bearer smiles faintly at the thought, children laughing among headstones, turning sorrow into play. Even in death's shadow, life insisted on itself. At last they stand before a large mausoleum, its iron gate rusted, its doors sealed but not silent. The stranger places his gloved hand upon the stone. Here lies the chorus, he says, the multitude of London's voices. Every sigh, every prayer, every goodbye is here. The dead do not rise to frighten us. They rise to remind us we are not forgotten. The lantern-bearer feels his fear ebb, replaced by something steadier. The graves no longer loom. They accompany. The fog no longer hides. It carries. And as they leave the cemetery, the lantern flame burns with a quiet confidence, as though it too has been blessed by the patience of the stones. The lantern-bearer follows the stranger out of the cemetery gates. Behind them, the stones fade into the fog, but the weight of memory lingers. Ahead, the streets of Victorian London glow faintly with lamps, and from behind shuttered windows comes another kind of hum. It is not the hum of mourning. It is the hum of curiosity. For if cemeteries belong to silence, the parlors of the city belong to whispers. Whispers of seances, of table rapping, of unseen hands moving in the dark. The Victorians feared death, but they also longed to touch it. And so, in gas-lit rooms draped with velvet curtains, they sought to call the dead back, if only for an hour. By the middle of the 19th century, London was enthralled by tales from across the Atlantic. Two sisters in New York had claimed they could speak with spirits through knocks on wood. Their fame spread, and with it a movement, spiritualism. Soon, drawing rooms from Mayfair to Whitechapel echoed with knocks, taps, and gasps as mediums promised to open doors between the worlds. Newspapers mocked, yet reported. Skeptics scoffed, yet attended. Scientists tested, yet secretly yearned to believe. For in a city where cholera could sweep away a family in a week, where fevers claimed children overnight, the desire to hear a lost voice was stronger than doubt. The lantern-bearer looks around nervously as the stranger explains. But did they truly call the dead? The stranger does not smile. Sometimes belief itself is enough. The heart hears what it longs to hear. Imagine stepping into such a parlor. Heavy drapes block the street lamps. A round table stands at the center, polished to a shine. Around it, men and women sit in silence, hands linked, eyes wide. A medium, perhaps a young woman in pale silk, perhaps a stern man with piercing eyes, lowers the gaslight until only shadows remain. "Is anyone with us?" the medium whispers. At first, nothing. Then, a faint rap beneath the table. Once, twice. A murmur runs around the circle. A candle flickers, though no draft passes. Someone gasps. The table trembles slightly, as if unseen fingers press against it. The medium's eyes close. Her voice drops lower. They are here. The lantern-bearer shivers. Even now, even knowing some tricks could be explained, the hush of the room, the closeness of breath, the silence before the knock. It feels undeniable. Victorians developed entire systems for these encounters. One rap meant yes, two meant no. Letters of the alphabet were recited, and raps signaled which to choose, spelling out messages slow as breath. Some mediums let their hands fly across slates, chalk scrawling words they claimed were guided by ghosts. Others allowed voices to speak through them, tones shifting, accents appearing, the sound uncanny and unsettling. The stranger describes it with a reverence not for the spectacle, but for the hunger beneath it. "These were not games," he says softly. "They were confessions." Every knock was a heartbeat against silence. Every trembling candle was hope refusing to die. In Mayfair, séances were fashionable entertainments. Ladies in black lace leaned forward eagerly. Gentlemen tried to mask unease with laughter. Servants peered from doorways, crosses tucked secretly beneath aprons. The wealthy could afford the best mediums, those rumored to conjure full apparitions. Some claimed to see veiled figures drift through the curtains. Others swore they felt hands upon their shoulders, cold and gentle, pressing them to weep. Not all were deceived. Trickery was rampant, trap doors, hidden wires, accomplices knocking from attics. Yet even when fraud was revealed, people returned, because the performance mattered less than the yearning it answered. In East End tenements, séances were humbler. A table, a candle stub, a neighbor said to have the gift. Children huddled in corners, watching as their mothers whispered names of husbands lost at sea or sons buried in paupers' graves. Here the raps might be the creak of wood, the flicker of a guttering flame. But the tears were real. For those who had little else, even the faintest sign was treasure. Not all embraced it. The church thundered that such practices were heresy, temptations of the devil. Scientists called it delusion. Yet some of the era's greatest minds sat at séance tables. Charles Dickens attended, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle defended, even skeptics like Michael Faraday investigated. What did they find? The lantern-bearer asks. The stranger's lantern throws his face half in shadow. They found what they carried within. The believer found faith, the skeptic found trickery, the grieving found comfort. The dead? Perhaps they found company. Behind the spectacle lay heavy cost. Many mediums were young women living precariously, trapped between fame and suspicion. Some may have believed in their own gifts. Others learned to give people what they most longed for, even at the expense of their own peace. To sit each night in darkened rooms, to hear endless sorrow poured out, to feel the weight of expectation pressing. Was this not itself a haunting? Even the living can be made into ghosts when forced to carry too many of another's griefs. The lantern-bearer starts as a real sound echoes in the London street around them, a knock sharp against wood. He swings the lantern wildly, but the alley is empty, only shutters, only fog. The stranger does not pause. "Do you see?" he murmurs. The city itself is a seance. Every creak, every echo is the past knocking. The question is whether we dare answer. The lantern-bearer holds the lantern tighter, torn between fear and fascination, and the stranger walks on toward another parlor, another story, as if the city will never exhaust its ghosts. Victorian London teemed with names whispered in candlelight. Daniel Dunglas Home, the Scotsman who made tables float and claimed to stretch his body like soft clay. He performed for lords and ladies, even for royalty, never charging a fee, as though the spirits themselves were his sponsors. Witnesses swore they saw him rise gently from the ground, levitating in full view. In one famous evening at a house on Ashley Place, Home drifted upward, out through a window, then back in through another, while onlookers gasped in awe and terror. Whether trick or truth, no one could forget the sight. Then there was Florence Cook, a young woman who channeled a spirit named Katie King. Before packed parlors, Katie would materialize, a pale, robed figure, her hair flowing, her hands cool and real to the touch. Some knelt, convinced they touched the other world. Others accused Cook of simply donning the costume herself. And so the city argued, not over whether the spirits visited, but over how much they could be trusted. Not everyone was content to believe. Michael Faraday, the scientist who tamed electricity, attended seances to test the famous table-turning phenomenon. He devised clever experiments, placing marks and instruments to measure pressure. His conclusion, the tables moved not by spirits, but by unconscious pressure of the sitter's own hands. The dead, he declared, were innocent of such tricks. Others tried their hand at exposure, setting traps for mediums, sprinkling flour to catch footprints, fastening knots to test whether spirits could untie them. Many frauds were unmasked. Yet for every trickster revealed, another rose, and still the parlors filled. The lantern-bearer frowns. If so many were false, why did people still go? The stranger's gaze is steady. Because truth was not the point. They sought not evidence, but solace. A lie that comforts can be stronger than a truth that wounds. In 1862, in a quiet house in London, a secretive society was formed, the Ghost Club. Its members were gentlemen, scholars, clergy, even scientists, all bound by curiosity about the unseen. They gathered to discuss hauntings, examine reports, and sometimes attend seances together. Unlike charlatans, they did not seek spectacle. They sought understanding. Over decades, the Ghost Club became the oldest society in the world devoted to psychical research. Charles Dickens himself was said to have been a member, torn between his love of story and his suspicion of trickery. The lantern-bearer's eyes widen. So even the great ones, they search too? The stranger nods. Even the brightest minds crave a lantern in the dark. For some, seances became a kind of theater. Invitations circulated, carriages lined up outside grand houses, and rooms filled with chatter before the gas lights dimmed. There was excitement, fear, thrill, no different than at a playhouse, except here the actors claimed to be the dead. Trumpets floated in darkness. Hands appeared, pale and fleeting, brushing cheeks before vanishing. Music boxes played by themselves, their tinny notes filling the room. Sometimes the scent of roses spread, though no bouquet had been brought, and always the gasp, the murmur, the leaning forward of bodies hungry to believe. The performance was not on a stage, but in the very air, woven from candle smoke and longing. The church warned that these practices invited not spirits, but demons, that to open the parlor to ghosts was to open it to corruption. In fiery sermons, priests warned, "It is not the dead who answer, but the devil in disguise." Newspapers alternated between ridicule and fascination. Satirical drawings showed mediums with hidden trumpets, or sitters so gullible they mistook their own shadows for spirits. Yet even ridicule spread the fever. The more people mocked, the more others longed to see for themselves. Beyond proof or trickery, what remained were the stories. Families who swore their lost children had spoken. Widows who carried on because they had felt their husband's hand one last time. Even skeptics found themselves haunted, not by ghosts, but by the look in the eyes of those who believed. Stories are stronger than stone, the stranger says. The cemeteries hold bones. The parlors hold stories. And it is stories that walk the longest. As they walk, the lantern-bearer feels the weight of his flame. He wonders if he set it upon a table and asked, would it flicker in answer? Would the stranger's silence be broken by a knock in the dark? He does not ask aloud. Some questions are too heavy for the night, but the thought itself lingers, as all thoughts of the unseen do, drifting with the fog, pressing against the edges of certainty. At last the stranger pauses before another narrow street. "Remember this," he says. "London itself is a séance. Its streets are the table. Its fog is the curtain. Its sounds are the raps, the knocks, the whispers. And you, lantern-bearer, are the sitter, listening, always listening." The lantern-bearer lowers his flame, heart steady now. For the city is no longer merely streets and stone. It is a parlor, vast and eternal, where the dead and the living share one breath. At last the stranger pauses before another narrow street. "Remember this," he says. "London itself is a séance. Its streets are the table. Its fog is the curtain. Its sounds are the raps, the knocks, the whispers. And you, lantern-bearer, are the sitter, listening, always listening." The lantern-bearer lowers his flame, heart steady now. For the city is no longer merely streets and stone. It is a parlor, vast and eternal, where the dead and the living share one breath. London's playhouses glittered with chandeliers and velvet seats, but behind the curtains other stories stirred. At Drury Lane, actors whispered of the man in gray, a tall figure in a powdered wig and cloak who drifted through the upper circle before vanishing into a wall. His appearance was said to be a blessing. Every sighting foretold a long, successful run for the play on stage. Stagehands told of footsteps echoing in empty corridors, of cold spots on stairwells, of costumes moved when no one had touched them. Some claimed to hear faint applause in the dead of night, as though audiences from centuries past still demanded encores. The lantern-bearer almost smiles at this. "Even the dead love a good performance," he murmurs. The stranger inclines his head. "Art leaves shadows too. Where voices rose, echoes remain, but beyond the glittering theaters, another London pressed down on its people. The workhouses, vast grim institutions meant to house the poor, the sick, the orphaned. To enter was to accept hunger, discipline, and despair. Families were torn apart, men to one ward, women to another, children sent off alone. Brick walls sweated with misery. Dormitories echoed with coughs that never ceased. Meals were meager, labor endless. It was said the walls themselves absorbed suffering, until at night the air thickened with sighs. Watchmen told of doors that rattled without cause, of pale figures drifting through dormitories, of children's voices humming lullabies long after the wards had fallen silent. The lantern-bearer grips the lantern tighter. Were they truly ghosts? The stranger's face softens. Perhaps not. Perhaps memory itself, pressed too deep into stone, begins to move. In such places, shadows are not visitors, they are residents. If the workhouses were prisons for poverty, the asylums were prisons for the mind. Institutions like Bethlehem Royal Hospital, had long been infamous. By the Victorian era, reform had softened some cruelties, but the air of despair lingered. Patients wandered endless halls, some silent, some screaming, some whispering words that no one else could hear. Treatments were harsh, often little more than restraint. And always the echo of suffering wound through the corridors. Visitors, yes, for a time, Bedlam allowed paying customers to walk its halls as if on spectacle, spoke of the uncanny atmosphere, the sudden stillness, the feeling of being watched, the sound of whispers not quite belonging to any single patient. Some believed the building itself had become a host, carrying the voices of centuries within its stones. The lantern-bearer shudders. Did the city pity them? Rarely, the stranger replies, but the city remembers them. And memory has a way of walking, even when no feet move. In narrow lanes behind iron gates stood orphanages, homes for children who had lost everything. The wards were filled with rows of small beds, the air with the scent of chalk and ink. Some children found kindness there. Many found only order, hunger, and the ache of abandonment. Nurses and visitors told of hearing children's laughter where none were playing, or of seeing small shapes darting in hallways long after bedtime. In one house it was said that toys in the nursery shifted at night, dolls turning their heads, rocking horses swaying slowly without a hand to push them. The stranger looks at the lantern-bearer. Children's echoes are the hardest to bear. For their shadows should have been light. They walk on, and the lantern-bearer realizes the city itself seems to lean closer. Every wall, every shutter, every stairwell has seen too much. Workhouses, asylums, theaters, orphanages. They are not just buildings. They are jars of memory, sealed and yet leaking, releasing fragments into the fog. London is not haunted, the stranger says at last. It is a haunting. The living pass through, but the city endures, carrying all voices, all cries, all laughter. Every brick is a page, every alley a line of verse. To walk here is to read a book too vast to ever finish. The lantern-bearer lowers his lantern, his fear replaced by something heavier but steadier. Reverence. London was a stage not only for actors, but for shadows. At the Theatre Royal Haymarket, actors whispered of sudden drafts that blew scripts from tables, though no door had opened. A leading lady once swore she felt a cold hand take hers just before she walked on stage. She played her part flawlessly, but fainted as soon as the curtain fell. At Covent Garden, musicians tuning their violins late at night reported hearing faint arias drifting through the hall. Arias that no one rehearsed, voices belonging to singers long dead. They told themselves it was imagination or wind, but the notes always matched a song once sung there, decades earlier by a prima donna buried in Highgate. The lantern-bearer smiles nervously. So even the arts are haunted? The stranger inclines his head. Art and death share one thing. Both linger long after the body departs. Drury Lane's man in gray was not its only shadow. Stage hands spoke of hearing galloping hooves across the stage, as though phantom horses pulled carriages through rehearsals. Costumes were found scattered in patterns no human hand had made, as if actors from centuries ago were preparing their scenes. The lore was so thick that actors grew superstitious. Some would bow toward the empty upper circle before each performance, as if saluting unseen patrons, for they believed that ignoring the dead could bring misfortune to the living show. The stranger gestures toward the invisible balconies. Applause never dies, it only changes form. The Victorians built asylums with high hopes, wide halls, gardens, great stone wings meant to hold troubled minds. But hope soured. Overcrowding, underfunding, misunderstanding of mental illness, all turned havens into prisons. At Colney Hatch Asylum, attendants spoke of sobbing in the wards long after patients had quieted. Footsteps echoed on stairwells even when every patient was accounted for. Once a matron reported seeing a young woman at the end of a hall, standing silently, her dress white, her gaze fixed. When the matron approached, the hall was empty. Later she realized the woman matched the description of a patient who had died years before. Was she a ghost? The lantern-bearer asks, his voice hushed. Perhaps, the stranger replies, or perhaps despair itself learns to wear a face. At St. Pancras Workhouse, locals whispered that the bells sometimes rang by themselves, soft as sighs. Night watchmen told of seeing lines of pale figures trudging silently across courtyards, heads bent, as though labor never ended even after death. Survivors carried their own memories, the scraping of spoons on empty bowls, the endless coughs of winter nights, the fear of separation. Some said they dreamed of the wards long after leaving, hearing voices calling them back, reminding them that hunger once owned them. The stranger pauses at a dark street where a workhouse once stood. The poor did not need ghosts, he says. Their lives were already haunted. Victorian London spun stories about its asylums. People whispered that if you walked past Bedlam at midnight, you could hear not only the cries of patients, but the voices of those who had died centuries earlier. Some claimed the cries mixed, creating a chorus of all who had ever suffered there. Others told of bedlam lights, faint orbs that floated above the building's roof, drifting slowly before vanishing. They said these were the souls of patients seeking escape, glowing briefly before fading into the London sky. The lantern-bearer glances upward, half expecting to see faint sparks even now in the fog. One story told of a nurse who, returning to check the nursery after midnight, found the toys arranged in a perfect circle on the floor. In the middle lay a small doll's bonnet, neatly tied. She locked the door, unnerved. The next morning the toys were back on the shelves, but the bonnet was gone. Children, even those grown, swore they felt their names whispered in dreams by voices of those who never grew up. The stranger's tone softens. When the city forgets its children, the children do not forget the city. They walk further, past shuttered houses, and the lantern-bearer begins to sense that London itself is an asylum. Its streets echo with mutterings, its fog carries unseen weeping, its walls are padded with memory. The stranger lowers his lantern. In theaters, the dead applaud. In workhouses, they trudge. In asylums, they whisper. In orphanages, they wait. The city does not choose what it remembers. It remembers everything. The lantern-bearer closes his eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. The fear that once gripped him now feels different, still heavy, but woven with compassion. Perhaps, he thinks, to walk among ghosts is not a curse. Perhaps it is a duty to bear witness. The lantern-bearer and the stranger leave behind the looming walls of workhouses and asylums. The city feels different now. The fog is no longer only weight, but also stage, and the cobblestones echo not with sorrow alone, but with expectation. For it is All Hallows Eve, and in Victorian London the night belonged not just to the dead, but to the living who honored them in whispers, rituals, and fears. As daylight fades, the markets change their tone. By day the stalls brim with vegetables, fish, and bread. But as night thickens, other wares appear. Apples polished bright as lanterns, nuts in heaping bowls, sugared cakes shaped like skulls or bones. Children laugh, daring one another to snatch sweets, while their mothers scold and smile in the same breath. At Covent Garden, hawkers call into the dusk, their voices softened by the fog. Apples for fortune-telling, apples for your love's true name. For apples were not merely food tonight, they were tools of magic. Young women bit into them, saved the seeds, and whispered charms to see whom they might wed. Boys played games of bobbing, the water spilling over onto the cobblestones, their laughter carrying down alleys where once it would have been silence. The lantern-bearer feels the warmth of it. Even in fear, he says, they made joy. The stranger inclines his head. Joy and fear are siblings. Both are born of not knowing what comes next. Elsewhere, taverns glow with firelight, drawing sailors, laborers, and travelers into their smoky rooms. Tankards clink, pipes glow, and in corners, voices lower as ghost stories begin. One man tells of seeing a woman in white drifting by the river, her face veiled, her sobs carried by the wind. Another swears he heard phantom footsteps following him through Whitechapel until he dared not turn his head. A third claims to have glimpsed a black dog with flaming eyes, a sure sign of death in the year to come. The tavern listens in silence, then erupts in laughter, then falls silent again when the door creaks, though no one enters. The stranger leans to the lantern-bearer. They laugh not because they disbelieve, but because laughter is easier than shivering. Beyond the warm glow of taverns, the alleys lie cold. Here, children dare each other to walk 3 steps into the dark, touch a certain door, then run back before the ghost of its former tenant appears. Lovers slip through shadows to meet, hearts pounding more from superstition than from secrecy. It is said that on this night the Harrow Lane whisperer could be heard, an invisible voice that called your name just once. Those who answered were never seen again. Some swore it was a spirit, others said it was the city itself, reclaiming what it had lost. The lantern-bearer grips his light tighter, listening. Every rustle feels like a call, every echo like a word half-formed. When the church bells strike 12, customs unfold. In some homes, families leave bread, salt, and a lighted candle on the table, offerings for souls who might wander. In others, mirrors are covered, lest spirits passing through choose to remain. Curtains are drawn, but children peek through cracks, hoping to glimpse a shadow crossing the yard. Young women perform charms, peeling an apple in one strip to toss over the shoulder, the shape it makes revealing the first letter of a future husband's name. Others gaze into bowls of water or polished mirrors by candlelight, believing a face will appear, their beloved, or perhaps a ghostly warning. The lantern-bearer shudders. Did they truly see? The stranger does not answer at once. When he does, it is quiet. On such nights even the still water dares to dream. As the night deepens, London feels alive in a new way. Smoke curls differently, carrying scents of roasted chestnuts and candle wax. Horses' hooves sound sharper, echoing longer down the narrow streets. Fog drifts low, curling around boots and hems like fingers reluctant to let go. Every church bell, every watchman's call, every child's squeal seems to fold into the rhythm of the city's heart. The stranger lifts the lantern high, and for a moment the lantern-bearer sees it. The city not as stone and soot, but as a great living body, veins of streets, lungs of fog, heartbeat of bells. And tonight, on All Hallows Eve, it breathes differently, slower, deeper, heavier with memory. The lantern-bearer notices children still running in the fog. Their laughter rises and falls like sparks in the gloom, never fully visible, only darting shapes, muffled shouts, the thud of shoes against cobblestones. One game is called Candle and Shadow. A group of children light a small taper, shielding it with their hands. One child sets it in the center of the street and dares the others to run past without the flame flickering. If the flame bends, the runner is marked. "The spirits brushed you," the children declare, and the marked child must carry the taper next. Another game is Knock and Vanish. They creep to the doors of houses said to be haunted, tap once, and flee before the spirit within answers. To be caught by an opening door, even if it was only a weary householder, was to risk a year of misfortune. The stranger watches them from a distance. "Play is a way of taming fear," he murmurs. They dress their trembling in laughter. The lantern-bearer nods, though his eyes never leave the shadows. He wonders whether the children truly play alone. Older youths play more daring games, half in jest, half in superstition. In narrow yards they toss nuts into the fire, one for themselves, one for the one they love. If the nuts crackle and leap together, their love will last. If the nuts roll apart, so too will their bond. Girls gather in circles with apples, peeling them in one long strip and tossing the peel over the shoulder. By the shape it forms on the ground, they divine the initial of their future husband. Some squeal with delight when the peel resembles the letter they long for. Others frown when it curls into something strange. The lantern-bearer smiles faintly at the sight. And do the letters tell the truth? The stranger lifts his lantern higher. Truth is less important than hope. In nights like these, hope itself is a kind of fire. They pass another tavern, windows glowing, voices spilling like warm smoke into the night. Inside, men and women sit close, their faces flushed with ale, their words thick with stories. Tonight, the ordinary rules of talk are loosened. On All Hallows Eve, every ear bends toward tales of the uncanny. One old sailor leans across a table, his hand trembling as he grips his tankard. "I swear it, by the Thames itself," he rasps. "Out at sea, we lost a man overboard, gone in the storm." Weeks later, when we docked, I saw him standing at Wapping Pier, pale as bone, dripping with water, staring straight at me. When I blinked, he was gone. But that night, I dreamed of him, whispering my name, begging me not to sail again, and I never did. The tavern grows quiet. Even those who scoff cannot quite laugh. The lantern-bearer feels the silence press like another body in the room. Another man, younger, speaks next. In Limehouse, they say there's a black coach that rides at night. No driver, no horses, only wheels that burn with sparks. If it stops before your door, someone within will not live to see morning. The listeners murmur, some in fear, some in delight at the chill. The stranger leans toward the lantern-bearer. Tales are not told for proof. They are told to share the weight of dread. At another table, a washerwoman tells her tale. She had been returning home from work one misty evening, her arms aching from the day. Passing a row of shuttered houses, she saw a woman standing still at the corner, cloaked, silent, her face veiled. "I thought she was waiting for someone," the washerwoman whispers. So I nodded polite. But when I stepped nearer, she was gone. No sound of feet, no turn of cloak, only the smell of damp earth where she'd stood. The next day, I heard old Mr. Porter died in that very house. The tavern falls into uneasy murmurs. The lantern-bearer feels his throat dry. "Do you believe her?" he asks softly. The stranger's eyes glint. Belief is not the point. The tale itself walks through the night just as she does. As they leave the tavern, the sound of a bell rings faint through the fog. A night-watch bellman, his lantern swinging, calls out the hour. Past 10 o'clock, and all is well. His voice fades and returns, muffled by mist. But some Londoners whisper that on All Hallows Eve, the bell sometimes rings twice when struck once, as if an unseen hand echoes the sound. To hear the double ring is said to foretell death in the household within the year. The lantern-bearer listens, counting the strikes. He hears them once, then again, and feels his stomach tighten, but the stranger only smiles. The city loves to keep its own people trembling. The bells of St. Paul's loom faint but steady over the fog. Tonight, parishioners gather for late services. Candles glow within, prayers rise, hymns stretch into the cold night. Outside, families pause at the steps, some whispering charms against evil, others dropping coins into alms boxes for the sake of wandering souls. It was said that if you entered a church at midnight on All Hallows Eve and looked into the darkened nave, you might see the spirits of parishioners who would die in the coming year, silently seated in the pews. Few dared to try, but the tale was told often enough to chill those who lingered outside. The lantern-bearer hesitates on the church steps. "Would you look inside?" he asks. The stranger's reply is quiet, almost a sigh. "I have no need. I have already seen enough of those who walk between years. They turn a corner and come upon a tavern with a painted sign of a raven perched upon a crown. The windows glow orange, shadows spilling across the cobbles. Inside, the air is dense with pipe smoke and murmurs. The lantern-bearer hesitates at the threshold, but the stranger nudges him inside. The room hushes when they enter. For on this night, new faces might as well be phantoms until proven otherwise. At last an old man near the fire raises a hand and continues his tale. "'Twas in Hampstead Heath," he says, "where the fog runs thicker than soup. I was walking home, lantern in hand, when I saw a child running ahead of me, laughing, clear as a bell. But when I quickened my pace to catch him, he vanished at a crossroad. All that remained was a small shoe lying in the dirt. I dared not touch it. The next morning I returned, and it was gone." The listeners murmur prayers under their breath. The washerwoman from before clutches her shawl tighter. The lantern-bearer swallows. "A ghost?" he whispers. The stranger replies, "Perhaps. Or perhaps the city plays tricks, giving shape to loneliness. Another voice rises, this one a young musician with ink-stained hands. He speaks of St. Bride's Church, where he practiced the organ late at night. "I swear," he says, "my fingers stopped, but the keys played on." A hymn, slow and mournful. And I saw a figure seated beside me, thin and pale, moving in time. When I blinked, the bench was empty, but the keys kept falling. I fled, and I have never returned. The tavern falls still. Some cross themselves. Others knock their knuckles on wood to ward off bad luck. The stranger lifts his lantern slightly. "Music too, remembers?" he says softly. "Even stone holds song." At a table by the window, two men debate omens. One swears that when a dog howls at a door, death waits inside. Another insists that to see a clock strike 13 means the year will bring sorrow. A woman interrupts, saying she once woke to find a white moth perched on her candle flame. Within a week, her brother had died. The lantern-bearer shivers. "Do you believe in such signs?" The stranger studies the flame of his lantern. Belief is less important than attention. The Victorians watched the world closely. In everything they saw a mirror of their fate. Perhaps that is the truest omen, that they were never blind. They leave the Raven and Crown. Outside, the streets are quieter now, the hour pressing toward midnight. The fog curls thick, and the lantern seems smaller against it. They turn into a narrow passage known as Harrow Lane. The lantern-bearer recalls the tale. A whisperer who calls your name. The silence grows heavy. Then, soft, almost beneath hearing, something brushes the lantern-bearer's ear. He stiffens, gripping the light. "Did you hear?" he gasps. The stranger's eyes glimmer. "It is only the city." And tonight the city is full of voices, but the lantern-bearer cannot shake the sensation that someone behind him breathes his name. He dares not look back. As they move on, they notice some houses with single candles burning in windows. These are not for light, but for remembrance. Families leave them for souls wandering, to guide them home for a single night. Others place bread and salt on the table, believing spirits need food as much as the living. One home has a jug of ale set outside the door, a gift for the dead who thirst after their long journey. The lantern-bearer feels his throat tighten. They welcomed them? "They did," the stranger says, "for fear is lessened when one makes a guest of it." The bells begin to toll midnight. Their sound rolls through the fog like waves. At every strike, the lantern-bearer feels the city quiver. At some churches, watchers claim to see pale figures slip through doors unlatched by unseen hands. At others, graveyards seem to sigh, as if the earth itself stirs beneath the weight of memory. The lantern-bearer listens, counting the peals. 12, then silence. But in the silence, he imagines a 13th, low and secret. He looks to the stranger, who only nods, as if to say, "You heard what was meant for you alone." They cross a narrow bridge. Beneath, the Thames breathes mist. The lantern-bearer peers over, drawn by its surface. Some said that if you gazed into water on this night, you might glimpse the faces of the dead, or the living who would soon join them. The lantern wavers. For a moment, he thinks he sees not his own face, but another, pale, watchful, eyes hollow. He recoils. The stranger steadies the light. Water remembers more than it reveals. Do not stare too long, or you will mistake reflection for prophecy. Even at this hour, the markets breathe in their own way. By day they bustle with trade. By night they are half empty, half haunted. Stalls are shuttered, but some remain open, lit by small oil lamps. A woman sells roasted chestnuts, the smell warm and sweet against the damp. Beside her, an old man offers apples, not for eating, but for charms. "Take one," he rasps. "Peel it clean. Toss the skin over your left shoulder. The letter it makes will tell your beloved's name." His hand trembles as he holds them out, as though he, too, believes. The lantern-bearer watches a young girl do as told. The peel falls in a shape that might be an S, might be nothing at all. She gasps as if fate itself had whispered to her. The stranger murmurs, "On such nights the simplest things are given power. A fruit becomes a message, a curl of skin a promise. The world conspires to turn small acts into prophecy." Down another lane, a group of youths parade in masks. Some wear crude paper faces painted with wide eyes. Others don animal hides, horns tied with twine. They march 2 by 2, rattling sticks, chanting rhymes meant to keep evil at bay. "Who goes there?" they cry, laughing as they march past shuttered homes. For a moment, the lantern-bearer feels as if he is watching spirits themselves, strange, mismatched, moving in rhythm through the fog. It was said that in some districts such processions collected coins or bread from door to door, gifts for good fortune, much like carols in winter. But tonight the youths ask for nothing. They seem only to walk, to fill the silence with their voices, to remind the city it is still alive. They turn a corner and find themselves before a small churchyard. The gate is unlocked, swinging faintly, though no wind stirs. Within, gravestones lean like weary shoulders, names worn by years. Candles flicker here, too, set by unseen hands earlier in the evening. The lantern-bearer steps inside. He feels the air thicken, though not with fear. It is a quiet, steady weight, as if hundreds of breaths linger here, layered over time. He whispers, "Are they near?" The stranger lowers his lantern. They are never far. Nights like this remind the living of what they carry always, that they are not alone. They pass a stone with ivy curling across its face. The name is almost gone. The lantern-bearer bends, touching the moss. Do they remember us as we remember them? The stranger's reply is slow. Memory is a bridge. You walk one way, they walk the other. Sometimes you meet in the middle. As they leave the churchyard, a sound cuts the silence, a low growl. From the fog, a black dog emerges, eyes glinting like coals. Its body is sleek, shadowy, its steps noiseless on the cobbles. The lantern-bearer freezes. He recalls the tavern tales, the black dog that presages death. He clutches the lantern to his chest. The stranger does not move. He gazes at the dog calmly. After a moment, the animal passes, silent, unhurried, disappearing into the mist as if it had never been. The lantern-bearer exhales in relief. Was it? "A dog," the stranger says simply. Then, after a pause, "Or perhaps an omen." But omens only mean what we give them. Fear feeds them more than fate does. Further along, some windows glow faintly with hidden watchers. Faces half seen behind curtains, eyes peering out. Children who cannot sleep, pressing their noses to the glass. Elders who remember too many All Hallows Eves, waiting to see if tonight the veil is truly thin. One window holds a boy clutching a doll, staring solemnly at the fog. The lantern-bearer lifts his light slightly, a small gesture of reassurance. The boy nods once, as though he understands, and disappears into the darkness of his room. Even watchers become part of the night, the stranger says. Every glance shapes it. Every hidden prayer gives it weight. At last, the bells strike again. 1 o'clock, the hour between midnight and dawn, the heart of the night. In Victorian London, It was called the hour of silence, when even the bravest footsteps faltered. The streets now are nearly empty. Shops closed, taverns hushed, even the markets gone quiet. The lantern flame seems smaller than ever, a single star in a great shadow. The lantern-bearer whispers, "Is this when they walk most freely?" The stranger's voice is steady. "They walk when they are remembered." And tonight every thought is a door. Their path winds back toward the Thames. The river breathes its endless rhythm, fog clinging low, swallowing sound. Along the embankment, scattered candles float in bowls, set adrift by those who wish to guide spirits safely on their way. The lantern-bearer watches them drift, each flame trembling but unbroken. "Do they find their way?" he asks. "They do," the stranger replies, "for remembrance is a light stronger than fear." They stand together in silence, watching the small flames float out into the dark water, fading one by one. The city exhales, the fog thickens, then softens. Somewhere a rooster crows, early, defiant. The first whisper of dawn lingers at the edge of the night. The lantern-bearer lowers his light. The stranger rests a hand upon his shoulder. And the night, though haunted, feels less heavy now, as if it too has grown weary and longs for rest. The hour grows late. The streets quiet, taverns close, and the last footsteps echo away into the fog. Behind shuttered windows, London's families prepare for sleep. The lantern-bearer and the stranger walk slower now, their breaths softened, listening as the city's outer noise gives way to an inner hush, the hush of people retreating into their rooms, their beds, their dreams. In Victorian homes, the night was never entered carelessly. Especially on All Hallows Eve, sleep was not only rest, but passage. To lie down and close one's eyes was to surrender to the possibility of visitors, from memory, from spirit, from places unseen. Families knew this, and so they prepared themselves carefully, shaping their bedtime rituals as both shield and invitation. In wealthier houses, tall beeswax candles burned in polished holders beside the bed. In humbler cottages, simple tallow stubs flickered against rough-plastered walls. But in nearly every room, light was left burning just a little while to soften the descent into sleep. Children watched the shadows dance across ceilings, half fascinated, half afraid. Parents warned them not to stare too long, lest they see faces form in the shifting dark. Some believed that on this night the shadows themselves were restless, eager to slip loose and wander. To let a candle burn low without trimming its wick was considered dangerous, an open door for misfortune. The lantern-bearer imagines those rooms, the small flames, the careful glances, the whispered prayers as each shadow stretched and folded into another shape. At many bedsides, words rose softly, nearly always the same. "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep." A simple prayer, but heavy with meaning on All Hallows Eve. Parents pressed these words into children like a charm sewn into a pocket. Some crossed themselves 3 times before blowing out the candle. Others placed a Bible near the head of the bed, believing its weight kept spirits away. In East End lodging houses, where the poor slept side by side in crowded rooms, one might hear dozens of voices murmur the same prayer at once, a low, steady chant weaving together like a lullaby. Not all trusted prayer alone. Herbs hung over doors or laid beneath pillows were thought to guard against unwelcome visitors in the night. Sprigs of rosemary for remembrance, lavender for calm, rowan for protection. In some parishes, mothers sewed tiny sachets of dried herbs into children's nightclothes so they would breathe safety as they dreamed. Other homes placed iron scissors beneath pillows, blades crossed to cut away nightmares. Shoes left by the bedside with toes pointing outward were believed to confuse evil spirits, making them stumble instead of finding the sleeper. A piece of bread set on the table was said to distract ghosts with hunger, keeping them from leaning too close to the bed. The stranger explained softly to the lantern-bearer. Every object at night became more than itself. A sprig, a book, a shoe, all carried the weight of hope, for in sleep one never knew what doors might open. Before climbing to bed, many households paused by the fire. The hearth was the heart of the home, the place where warmth and life lingered even in the coldest night. Families banked the coals carefully, covering them with ash so they would smolder until morning. But on this night, some left the fire burning brighter, believing the dead might need its glow if they came to visit. Children were sometimes told, "If you dream of fire tonight, it means a spirit has passed through the house." And so they climbed the stairs with that thought smoldering in their minds, wondering if a flicker in their dreams would be the sign of a visitor. Doors were locked firmly, bolts drawn, chains slid into place. But in some homes, one door was left unlatched, or a key left turned only halfway. This was not carelessness, but tradition. On All Hallows Eve, it was said that spirits might knock, and to bar them completely was an insult. Better to leave a narrow crack, a sign of respect, a quiet invitation. You may come, but softly. You may enter, but only as memory. The lantern-bearer shudders at the thought, yet the stranger nods. The living have always made bargains with the dead. Better a gentle visit than a furious haunting. At last the rooms grow still, sheets are drawn up, pillows adjusted, children curl against parents, elders sigh into their own quiet breathing. Outside the fog presses close against walls, listening. Inside, the houses exhale, holding their families close. Some drift into dreams quickly, carried off by exhaustion. Others lie awake, staring at ceilings, listening for the faint creak, the rustle, the breath that does not belong. For on All Hallows Eve, the border between silence and sound feels thinner than ever. And as the lantern-bearer imagines this great city folding into its beds, the stranger lowers his light. Now, he whispers, they wait for dreams. And in dreams, they may find visitors they cannot meet by day. The city lies quiet now. Behind shuttered windows, sleepers drift into that other country, the one entered without footsteps, where roads are made of memory and air is heavy with symbol. In Victorian London, dreams were not taken lightly. To dream was to touch something more than imagination. It was to stand at the threshold of fate. Among the most popular beliefs were those about love. Young women especially held close the thought that All Hallows Eve dreams revealed their future husbands. Some place sprigs of rosemary beneath their pillows, whispering, "Whoever is to be my true love, let him appear in my dream tonight." Others ate a small salty cake before bed, then refused to drink water, believing the man who came to bring them drink in a dream would be the one they would wed. There were tales of girls waking with cheeks flushed, swearing they had seen the face of a man they did not yet know, only to meet him years later at a market or in a church pew and recognize him instantly. Whether truth or self-fulfilling prophecy, such stories spread quickly, reinforcing the belief that love walked most surely through dreams. The lantern-bearer listens with wide eyes. Do you think such things were real? The stranger smiles faintly. What is real in a dream? If it shapes your heart, is it not truth enough? Not all dream visitors brought comfort. Many Victorians believed dreams could foretell death. To dream of a winding sheet, a burial cloth, was said to mean someone in the household would soon pass. To dream of one's own teeth falling out signaled a death near at hand, often of a family member. A bird flying through a dream chamber was also feared, for birds were seen as carriers of souls. More chilling still were the reports of sleepers visited by the dead themselves. A mother dreamed of her son standing at the foot of her bed, pale but calm, only to learn the next morning that he had died far away during the night. Such stories were told in hushed voices, for they seemed to prove that dreams were not illusions but messages, delivered across impossible distance. Some claimed dreams carried them to other places, streets they had never walked, houses they had never entered. Later, upon traveling, they found those same places waiting, exactly as they had seen them. Skeptics laughed, but the tales multiplied. One sailor told of dreaming of a harbor with a crooked mast jutting out of the water. Years later, he sailed into just such a port. It was as if I had been there before, he swore, guided by my own dream. Victorians collected such accounts in almanacs and penny papers, part curiosity, part warning. For if dreams could show the future, who could say what else they revealed? Most haunting of all were the dreams of loved ones departed. On All Hallows Eve especially, it was said the veil grew thin enough that the dead could slip gently into a sleeper's vision. A child might dream of a grandmother rocking by the fire, humming as she once did. A widow might see her husband smiling, silent but present. These were not nightmares but tender visitations, remembered upon waking with both comfort and sorrow. The stranger explained softly, "In such dreams, grief becomes bearable. The dead return not to frighten, but to remind the living that love is not erased by death." Dreams were so important that some Victorians kept dream dictionaries, small books that listed symbols and their meanings. To dream of apples meant good fortune. To dream of mirrors warned of deception. To dream of rain promised renewal. Street vendors sold these cheaply, and readers pored over them by candlelight, matching their own night visions to the printed interpretations. Yet no book could fully contain the mystery. For every dream told aloud, another was kept secret, too strange or too close to the heart to be shared. And so, as the night deepens, thousands in London dream, some of love, some of death, some of places they may never walk. The city itself seems to sleep with them, each dream a hidden chamber, each sleeper a small lantern glowing in the fog of the night. The lantern-bearer glances at the stranger. Do dreams truly open doors? The stranger's answer is quiet, almost fading into the silence. Every dream is a door. The question is not whether it opens, but whether we notice when we step through. The lantern's glow flickers softly against the stone, and the stranger speaks again. Not all dreams are made only of our own thoughts. Sometimes the night carries visitors. Victorians often believed that the dead returned not only in waking shadows, but in the deepest sleep. These visitations were quiet, almost tender. A lost child might appear at the foot of a bed, smiling with a gentleness that pierced the heart. A father gone to war might rest a hand on the shoulder of his son, silent but steady. Many kept these dreams secret, afraid others would call them delusion. Yet the dreamer awoke convinced the beloved had come, not as a ghost, but as a memory made flesh for one fragile moment. Such dreams were often spoken of in whispers over breakfast tables, eyes downcast, hands trembling faintly. Others told of more unsettling visitors, figures who did not speak but watched. A woman waking from uneasy sleep might recall the sensation of someone standing in the corner of her room, silent, unmoving, their presence heavy and undeniable. Sometimes the dream blurred into waking, leaving the sleeper uncertain. Had it been only imagination, or had some shadow truly lingered there? These tales fed into the growing Victorian obsession with sleep paralysis, though the term itself was rarely used then. Instead, people spoke of the old hag, a suffocating presence pressing upon their chest, stealing their breath. They believed these figures were not dreams at all, but intruders slipping across the veil. Nightmares, in fact, took their very name from this belief. The mare was no horse but a spirit, a wicked presence that rode the sleeping body, pressing down until the victim awoke gasping. Illustrations from the era show shadowy hags crouched on the chests of sleepers, eyes gleaming with cruel delight. In dark alleys and cramped garrets, such terrors were common. Exhausted workers described waking with their hearts pounding, unable to move, the memory of a crushing weight still lingering. Physicians called it disorder of digestion or troubled nerves, but among ordinary folk it was whispered simply, "The mare rode me last night." Not all nocturnal visitors were sinister. Some were believed to come with purpose. To dream of a white figure passing silently through the room was taken as a blessing, a guardian spirit watching over the sleeper. To hear soft music in one's dream, though no instrument played nearby, was said to be the work of angels, placing peace upon the heart. Children especially were thought to be close to such visitations. Parents spoke of their little ones waking with smiles, insisting they had spoken with a kind woman dressed in light, or a grandfather who had long since passed. "Children see more than we do," Victorians would murmur, nodding gravely, as if to confirm what all already suspected. The young were closer to the unseen. But alongside protectors and the dead were the mischievous. Night imps, goblins, and household spirits were said to slip into dreams, tangling hair, hiding shoes, or whispering nonsense that left the dreamer laughing or confused upon waking. These tales carried a lighter note, often told with chuckles around the hearth. "Do you know why your hair is knotted in the morning?" an old grandmother might ask. "The fair folk have been at play while you slept." Such beliefs blended folklore with the realities of daily life, simple explanations for the small mysteries of morning. Yet the most haunting accounts were those in which dreams seemed to spill into waking life. A man would dream of a visitor standing by his bed, then wake to find the candle flame shivering though no breeze stirred. A woman swore she felt a hand brush her cheek in the night, though she slept alone. The Victorians had no need for modern explanations. For them, these were signs of the thinness of the veil, the proof that in the deepest night, sleepers were never truly alone. The lantern-bearer leans closer, voice hushed. "Do you believe such visitors still come?" The stranger tilts his head, eyes soft. "Perhaps they always have. Perhaps they always will. For what is memory, if not a visitor? What is grief, if not a presence that lies down beside us night after night?" And so, in the long Victorian nights, dreams became both sanctuary and threshold. The dead could comfort, the wicked could oppress, the mysterious could watch silently from corners unseen. For every soul who laid their head down upon a pillow, sleep was never empty. It was a room with open doors. The lantern flickers, the hum beneath the stones deepens, and the listener feels it, the sense that the night is not silent, but populated, full of unseen presences that gather gently around the sleeper. Even as the city slept, few Victorians trusted dreams entirely. Just as doors were bolted and shutters fastened, so too were small protections set in place before sleep. Some placed a Bible beneath the pillow, its weight believed to guard against troubling visions. Others tucked a silver coin into a child's hand, so no spirit could lead them astray in dreams. In poorer homes, where such tokens were scarce, families relied on whispered blessings, words spoken softly into the dark, meant to hang in the air until morning. A bowl of water left at the bedside was another custom. It was said that wandering spirits, pausing to gaze into their own reflection, would be distracted and leave the sleeper in peace. Shoes left crossed at the foot of the bed served the same purpose, to confuse the steps of the unwelcome. And so, with Bible, coin, water, or prayer, the Victorians laid down at last. Their beds were not simply for rest, but for passage, their rituals small boats meant to carry them safely across the seas of night. The lantern-bearer and the stranger pause, listening as the city sighs into deeper silence. The stranger lowers the lantern until it glows faintly on the ground. "Tonight," he whispers, "they are protected. Tonight, their dreams may be only dreams." The lantern glows low, its flame softened by the weight of the hours. The night has grown old, and yet it feels as though it has been only a breath since we first stepped into the fog. Now, as the city sleeps around us, we turn back along the path we have traveled, carrying with us not only stories, but a sense of presence, of walking in places where memory lingers. Do you remember where it began? The hush of the streets settling into silence as London seemed to hold its breath. The stones were slick with fog, the lamps little islands of gold, and from the very first steps, the air carried the sense that the city itself was alive. Not alive in the way of markets or clamor, but in a deeper way, alive with echoes, shadows, and whispers. We walked with the lantern-bearer, who guided us down narrow lanes where the past seemed to press in close, and with the stranger, who spoke in quiet tones, unspooling memories, not as history lessons, but as living presence. Together they invited us to walk not just into streets, but into the heart of a city that remembers. We passed through the houses that watch, their windows like eyes, their doors like mouths half open. Behind those walls people had lived, loved, suffered, and gone, and yet their impressions remained. Some rooms held grief, others laughter, some only silence. But each house watched still, holding a story it could not let go. From there the path led us into the cities of the dead. The cemeteries stretched like shadowed neighborhoods, the gravestones standing as markers of names not yet entirely lost. The Victorians walked among them with reverence, placing flowers, whispering prayers, telling stories to keep memory alive. We listened as epitaphs became conversations, as grief turned to ritual, as absence became presence. Later still, we stepped into the parlors of spirits. In rooms lit by flickering candles, men and women sat with clasped hands, waiting for knocks, for whispers, for the brush of a phantom hand. Some believed, some doubted, but all hoped. The air was thick with longing, for the lost to return, for proof that love does not end, for the comfort that the veil between here and there might be thin. We walked further into the shadows behind walls, the theaters haunted by actors long gone, the workhouses where suffering etched itself so deeply that even silence seemed to cry, the asylums where despair left marks that time could not erase. These were not simply buildings, but vessels of memory, still breathing with the lives once contained within. And then we entered the streets of All Hallows Eve, alive with rituals and games, with apples bobbing in barrels, with tavern tales told by firelight. We saw candles placed in windows to guide the wandering dead. We heard bells tolling midnight. We stood by the river as floating lights drifted across its dark water. The city was not merely haunted, it was celebratory, fearful, tender all at once, a place where life and death walked hand in hand. Finally, we arrived at the most intimate place of all, the bedroom, the dream, the silence of sleep. We lingered with the Victorians as they whispered prayers, tucked charms beneath pillows, and drifted into dreams filled with omens, with loved ones returning, with shadows pressing close. We watched as sleep became not only rest, but a passage, an open door through which visitors might come. Now here we are. The lantern flickers low. We have seen the city in its streets and houses, in its graves and parlors, in its rituals and its dreams. We have heard its laughter and its grief, its whispers and its silences. And as we turn back along this path, we realize that what we have walked is not only Victorian London, but something larger, the shared truth that every city, every life, holds echoes that never vanish. The stranger pauses. His lantern trembles slightly, as though stirred by a wind we cannot feel. He looks at us, not with the eyes of history, but with the eyes of memory. "You have walked far," he says. "Now you must rest." The city agrees. The fog grows heavier, the bells grow distant, the whispers turn to hush, the houses close their eyes, the graves fold into quiet, the parlors darken, the taverns fall silent, the beds cradle their dreamers. All that remains is the rhythm of breath, steady, patient, eternal. We walk back, lantern low, carrying with us not fear, but stillness, a sense that the night is not empty, but full of what has been, of what lingers, of what protects. And when at last we return to the threshold where we began, the stranger lifts the lantern high, one final time. Its flame dances briefly, then steadies. "The journey ends," he whispers, "but the silence remains. And in that silence you may rest." The lantern-bearer lowers the light until its glow is soft as a heartbeat. Around us, London has grown utterly still. The fog no longer moves like restless breath. It hangs, waiting, as though the whole city listens. In this pause, the stranger begins to speak again, his words measured, gentle, carrying the weight of everything we have seen. "There are lessons," he says, "that only silence can teach. The first is fragility. How delicate the human heart proves to be. We saw it in the faces of the poor shivering in the workhouse, in the faint smiles of children waiting for a dream to bring them comfort, in the candles set on graves to light a path for those who had gone. All of it revealed how thin the veil truly is between strength and breaking. The Victorians understood this in ways that many of us forget. They lived with death at their doorsteps, illness sweeping through alleys, fires consuming entire families, the sudden loss of children, mothers, fathers. They built rituals not out of superstition alone, but out of recognition that life is always precarious. To light a candle, to cross a pair of shoes at the bedside, to whisper a prayer into the dark. These were ways of admitting, I cannot hold this world together alone. Fragility is not weakness. It is truth. It is the soft reminder that all of us, no matter how bold or how certain, carry cracks. And perhaps that is why these stories soothe us tonight. They remind us that we are not the first to tremble. The second lesson is about society itself, the strange ways people respond when fear moves through them. Some open their hands in compassion. We saw families leaving bread and salt on tables for wandering spirits, a gesture of welcome even to the unseen. We saw neighbors pausing at graves to honor names not their own, carrying the grief of strangers. But we also saw the other side, suspicion, punishment, the turning away of eyes. Asylums filled with cries that no one wished to hear, tavern tales turning cruel as they mocked those who believed too easily, whispers branding certain houses as cursed. Fear made people close their hearts as often as it made them open them. And so we learn. Society is a mirror. It reflects back what we choose to give. If we offer care, care multiplies. If we turn from pain, pain multiplies. The silence of the city teaches us to choose wisely, for our echoes may last longer than we imagine. The third lesson is endurance. For even within shadows, we found lives persisting. The seamstress whose memory clung to her narrow house had little but a candle and a song, yet still she endured in story. The children who dreamed of angelic visitors carried those dreams like secret treasures into their waking hours. The families who buried their dead continued to place flowers year after year, long after tears had dried. Endurance is not grand. It is not triumph or victory. It is quieter than that. It is breath continuing when breath seems impossible. It is a lantern kept lit when fog presses thick. It is one more step taken, even in shoes heavy with sorrow. That is the deepest lesson the Victorians leave us. Not that they conquered the darkness, but that they walked with it, that they carried their fears into sleep and still rose with the dawn. The stranger looks into the lantern, the flame reflecting in his eyes. Fragility, he whispers, society, endurance. These are not history's lessons alone. They are your lessons too, to be fragile, to belong, to endure. If you can hold these truths, you will not fear the silence. You will rest within it. The lantern-bearer nods, lowering his head as if in prayer. The city, too, seems to nod, its houses leaning, its stones settling, its river flowing steady as breath. The silence deepens. The fog presses close, but no longer feels heavy. It feels gentle, like a blanket drawn over tired shoulders. The stranger's voice softens, almost fading into the rhythm of the night. Take these lessons with you. Let them rest beside you as you sleep, for they are not burdens, they are companions. And with that, the city breathes again, not with clamor, but with calm. The lantern flickers again, as though sensing we have turned from looking behind us to looking within ourselves. The stranger does not speak of houses or graves or streets now. Instead, his words reach quietly toward you, the one listening in the dark. All this time we have walked together through fog and silence, but the city we entered is not only London. It is every place that has ever carried memory. Every street you have known, every home you have passed, every quiet face glimpsed in shadow. Each of these is a fragment of history, too. History is not distant. It is not only written in books or carved into stone. It is carried in you, in the way you pause before a doorway, remembering a voice, in the way you keep a small object on your table, not for its use, but for the person it recalls. In the way silence sometimes feels heavier than noise, because in silence you hear what lingers. The Victorians had their rituals, their charms, their whispers. You have your own. Perhaps it is a candle lit at night, perhaps a photograph left in view, perhaps nothing more than the memory of a laugh or the sound of a name. These are threads of the same fabric. Think of fragility, not only theirs, but yours. How many times have you felt cracks beneath your feet? How often has your heart trembled, though you smiled for the world? You are not unlike those families placing coins beneath pillows or whispering blessings over children. You too have found small ways to hold yourself together. The stranger seems to lean closer. His voice is gentle, steady. To admit your fragility is not to admit defeat. It is to admit that you are human, and in that you are never alone. Think, too, of belonging. You live in a web larger than you may see. The footsteps you take echo against stones walked by others. The words you speak are never entirely yours. They carry the weight of all who came before you, shaping the very language in your mouth. When you care for someone, when you show compassion, you are repairing the mirror of society. When you turn away, when you choose silence not as listening, but as avoidance, you allow the cracks to widen. The Victorians remind us we are never without influence. Even in silence, we leave echoes. And what of endurance? Consider the ways you have endured, not with trumpets, not with banners, but with quiet persistence, rising each morning even when the night was heavy, carrying on when answers were scarce, holding to your breath when the world pressed hard. This too is history, not grand victories, but the steady pulse of survival. Just as the seamstress endured in her narrow house, just as children endured with their dreams of angels, so too do you endure in your own way. The stranger lowers his lantern. Its glow brushes your face as if to remind you that your endurance is seen even in the dark. You have carried much, he says. You have not faltered. And even if you did, still you are here. That is enough. And so the story turns outward, to you resting now in your own space. The houses of London fade, the graves grow quiet, the parlors darken. But your breath remains, steady, calm. This journey has not been about ghosts and shadows alone. It has been about you, your place within the endless chain of lives. You carry fragility, you carry belonging, you carry endurance. And tonight, you are allowed to set them down for a while. The lantern-bearer bows his head. The stranger closes his eyes. The fog folds itself into stillness. The city is gone, yet its silence remains with you, a companion at your side. The lantern's flame is nearly gone now. It dances weakly against the fog, as if it knows its task is complete. The stranger looks upon it with quiet eyes, then raises his hand, cupping the little light as though to shield it from the night's breath. This is the hour, he whispers, when all journeys must end. London lies utterly still. The streets, once alive with laughter, bells, and whispers, are empty now. The houses close their eyes. The churches fold their voices into silence. Even the river moves with the slow patience of sleep, carrying reflections like drifting dreams. Above, the sky holds faint stars, dimmed by the fog, but steady. They, too, seem to breathe with the city, keeping watch over sleepers. It is a time not of endings, but of rest, a pause between what has been and what will come. As the lantern weakens, so too does memory's sharpness. The graves blur back into stone. The parlors close their curtains. The tavern laughter fades. The beds grow warm with dreamers, their breathing soft and deep. All the ghosts we have met, the seamstress, the child, the patient, the watcher in the corner, slip back into silence. They are not gone. They are resting as we must. And you, listener, have walked far. You have carried echoes through fog and shadow, through candlelight and dream. Now you may set them down. Close your eyes. Feel the weight of the day lifting. Let the lessons we have gathered, fragility, belonging, endurance, settle beside you, like friends sitting quietly near your bed. They do not ask anything of you now. They only stay so that you may rest. The stranger lowers the lantern until it touches the ground. The flame flutters once, twice, then steadies, a final heartbeat of light. Breathe, he says softly. Only breathe. That is enough. The fog folds itself around you, not heavy, but soft. The silence hums like a lullaby. The city sleeps. The world sleeps. And now, so may you. Thank you for walking with us through these streets of shadow and memory. Thank you for listening, for keeping company with the forgotten. Until we meet again, may your rest be deep, your dreams gentle, your silence full of peace. Good night.